So thoughts? I'm going to try and, I said I'm going to try and do this YouTube feed to see if we can start to do live streams. So I have OBS installed. I'm not sure if it's running or if it's just barfing. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't run. What the hell? It isn't running. I might have to reinstall OBS. And then, so yeah, meanwhile, there's a few of you in here. I know Andreas has probably a lot of opinions on this as well.
Adam, I was just going to jump in because I took a few notes as you were talking because I find it really interesting, and I'm in a typical kind of corporate finance environment, so a lot of the structures are the polar opposite of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
From a dedicated, majority of you are technically savvy perspective, and just a couple of things I was just going to add to what you were saying. And you were talking about hierarchies versus flat structures, and the thing I've noticed is that in any organization where management eventually or by default is technically detached or inexperienced, the pattern I keep seeing is that they want to communicate with people that talk in definites. So they'll self-select for the person that says, yes, I can put a team together and deliver this in 6 months. Whereas we all know that once you get to a sufficiently technical level, you would never just react in such a naive or definitive way. You would say, well, it depends. We've got to explore the domain. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, they just say, yes, I can do it. And they have no idea what they signed up for. And it could be like 300 requirements that they just took on, right?
So I find ignoring just scale, because you talked about scale and needing your infrastructure team and stuff like that, or whatever. Ignoring that, I find management eventually starts self-selecting deputies that just go and commit to work, and then will coerce or manipulate or game the system to just get things done in some way. Yeah. So that was one point I was making. The next point was just going back to Agile, and the only thing I wanted to say there is I see the same thing happening with Agile that happened with the way people reacted to TDD, to SOA, and also happening with microservices. People see something new, and a lot of people will just look at the blog post and go, and then imprint their own, project their own understanding onto it, and then do a bad job of it. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the community as a whole.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
And then it gets done badly. But the second thing is context. And the thing about Agile that I try to remember is it came out of an opinionated consensus, a set of people that were almost certainly not doing anything like Scrum, put together a few ideas and eventually agreed on a thing to share with the world. And it's almost certainly the case that none of those people were doing all those things in exactly the same way. And certainly not in a form that Scrum or the scaled Agile, horrific organization, safe or whatever, have mutated these things to become. And the way I see something like Scrum is that in a corporate environment where you have someone who hastily and poorly assembles a team, having a few relatively simple ceremonies is like the bare minimum. It's the training wheels for a new development team. And so I see it being useful up to a point in a team that has no experience at all of each other. But the thing I take from the word Agile, and this is the thing that I've always tried to communicate myself, is it is what you understand to be common sense on a personal level, scaled up to the non-intuitive level of the team. So for example, if I was writing an essay, I wouldn't write the essay in the waterfall sense. I wouldn't perfect the first sentence, then perfect the second sentence, and just work linearly all the way through the essay. I would have a skeleton. I would pick certain parts of that skeleton and refine it. I would test it out with other people, revisit it, restructure. And what I see a lot of managers do is they understand how to work in an iterative and incremental way, testing their ideas when they do things personally. But the moment they're under political pressure to deliver, the moment they're working with other people and they struggle to communicate, or there's a lack of empathy between those people, and it's not an experienced team, people start managing in a way that they would never manage themselves individually. And so I tend to advocate these kind of personal values of how you would prepare an essay or prepare a presentation, and try to say, superimpose how you would get a team to do that, and stop labeling it Scrum or stop labeling it safe or whatever. Just try and imagine working in an iterative and incremental way. And the other thing I've actually seen people quote Agile back to me and say things like, well, Agile says that you don't do any planning.
Yeah.
I've actually heard people say that to me.
I say that. I say that all the time.
And I say to people, it's like, well, hang on a second. If there's no planning, then what is this idea of not sticking religiously to the plan? That seems kind of a contradiction in terms. On the one hand, someone's saying don't stick to it religiously, and the other side of it, someone's saying don't plan at all.
We covered this, I think, on a previous episode here. This last point that you're raising, exactly. And I think Agile came through XP, which TDD was part of, and I think there was a problem with the time when the Agile Manifesto came up by those core people, where they said, you know what, the software industry is so broken, we will not trust people to do UML and to do waterfall properly and all that. That is just even worse politics than we see. And so they said, you know, TDD will give us emergent design. And that is how Agile got sold to the technical side. It was through those XP, you know, you look at, you know, the bowling ball game example, you read all those people, right? I was in that, you know, in that crew for a long time, huge Agile proponent. From a technical perspective, always trying to bring in the technical people to Agile conferences. In, you know, in the last 10 years, it certainly shifted to be more of a life coach type thing, where it's all the soft skills only and very few technical talks with, you know, BDD frameworks or anything else that you might want to use for specifications. But I think the sale of Agile was done through TDD, and the emergent design was the Trojan horse, which means, hey, we figured out design, so you don't have to worry about it. And I think a lot of people that were new to programming or were shifting into an Agile role, they said, great, well, I'll just solve these very focused problems, you know, just make the next test pass, and that's good enough, then we can go. And I'm not distracted, I'm not gold plating. It was sold by all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think what it did do, unfortunately, the really large negative effect is that it threw away design, like proper design. And what we're saying with event modeling is that you can have small design up front. And this is like doing UML without all of the onerous pieces of saying, I need a box for every class, and I need to have every method in my sequence diagram.
The thing about your event modeling that screamed out to me was that the thing that fixed these corporate story-driven environments for me was reading Jeff Patton's book on story mapping, and this idea of having a walking skeleton that you could talk your way along, and then you could create a number of journeys, goal-orientated journeys, and talk about alternative paths. Now, when I saw your event modeling, what I saw was the artifact-driven version of a story map. You've got the user interface, you've got the aggregates or the streams, you've got the commands and the events. But I can kind of treat them as almost isomorphic to each other. It's just that with the story map, I've got no hints at all as to what those artifacts are. Whereas with event modeling, you discover them as you go along. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've compared it many times. It's going to be a big part of the book, is the comparison of what the industry is used to right now and what the difference is. I believe that thinking in BDD terms, like you can't just treat BDD as a spec thing you give to developers. It's a nice little way for product owners to talk to developers. That is, what a waste.
Yeah.
What a waste to have that powerful of a practice only be used for those two roles in those scenarios. Why not have an understanding of what the overall system's doing using the same mechanisms in your brain? I do a lot of reading on vision, hearing, and all these things because our brains are actually incredibly slow. Our reality is so far removed from what's actually happening in the physical world around us, and this actually works on a very large time level. We're talking about microseconds here, about you and I looking at each other and having reactions and all that. There's these things that are, I forget what they call it, I think it's seconds or something like that, where your brain fills in the blanks between what your eyes see. That's why in a mirror, if you ever try, you can never see your eyes move because there's
the
instinct
little
in your
cicadas.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? And so and same thing with your actual vision, where your optic nerve enters your eye as a blind spot, but you don't see a blind spot when you're looking around. You actually are colorblind outside of your focal area, right in the center of your vision. Everything's actually black and white all around in your field of view. Your brain is filling in what it remembers those colors. So it's a big lie what we're looking at. And that's how our brains work, because we're a mush of slow chemical reactions compared to electrical currents in a CPU. Yet we seem to be faster at everything than what we see in a computer. Like, oh, this game sucks. The frame rates are awful, right? Like, why can't I get a faster computer? It's weird. So what to get back to the subject, we can experience the same thing overall, that we need to trust our brains to fill those in. And so I think the specification by example, show me how this works, those are things that we need to trust people's brains to fill in the blanks. A lot of times I say, hey, we need to expand how this specific view changes with different data. With the projects that we ran ourselves, we rarely got into the given when-thens, because we trust the people that can put two and two together. This is how the system's going to work. And there was enough of an example in the actual workflow to not make a stupid decision and to invest enough time to do that. And I think what happens when you have something like BDD that's de-scoped to such a small number of people is that you lose that trust of what that understanding is. And what event modeling is doing is it's bubbling this up to the organizational level overall, so that your technical and business visions align and are understood as as best as possible. And everyone says, like, why isn't this there yet? We see how all these data connections are made. Like, what's taking so long? These command handlers generally take 2 or 3 days for a developer to do. You have a team of 10 that's been working for 3 weeks. Where is it, right? You were able to copy paste an entire project from the previous successful one you did. Why are you coding more infrastructure? Oh, because this and that. You can actually see the excuses, right? That fine line of functional requirements and actual state transitions, that's the best way to talk about functional requirements as opposed to non-functional requirements, right? Is like, how does it change the system? How does the system change over time? That's a by example thing. So you could have a concrete answer to those things.
Yeah.
So
there were two other points, because you mentioned emergent design, and I think back to when that was happening, and it's amazing how people's either political or scientific beliefs start manifesting themselves in different ways. And you mentioned emergent design, and that was happening at a time where concepts like chaos theory were very popular in understanding the world. People thought that you could find these very fundamental chaotic equations that would describe the world and the universe. And so I wonder if And there were books, literally books saying emergent design at the time, not related to IT and technology, but actually emergent design as an evolutionary concept, for example. And so I wonder if that was also a phase where this was a fashionable idea in nature that people thought could just carry into the technology world. Because I actually saw it in biology as well. And a very famous scientist called John Maynard Smith actually believed in a concept called group selection theory as opposed to selfish gene theory, neo-Darwinism. And decades later, he admitted that because he was so strongly wedded to the idea of socialism, he also was very attracted to scientific ideas that were aligned to his intuitive understanding of socialism. And he actually biased himself, he prejudiced himself to favor certain scientific concepts based on some of his political ideas. So I just saw a little bit of a parallel there. And you mentioned something else.
Well, let's talk about chaos theory, because that's interesting. That's emergent. The deeper you look, the more intricacies you see that it's complex and more complex. How long is the coastline of England, right? If you measure it at this level, it's shorter, and the closer you get, the longer it gets, until you have this ratio. I think it's the dimensions that you talk about, the fractional dimensions, right? So if you've done any kind of fractal, you can look this up on there's a lot of awesome videos on this on YouTube. They're fascinating to watch about fractional dimensions. If you look at emergent design from what the red-green refactor thing does to a solution, it's doing the opposite. It's trying to smooth out what could be looked at as gold plating or distractions, and doing, writing a requirement that's written haphazardly or just, in a standard way even. I'm not sure if haphazardly is a good word, but I don't think there's I personally didn't think that there was a really good set of requirements being given to developers for a long time. So it could be any number of formats that you could get your requirements in. And so there could be, you kind of had, your pick as to what your interpretation is. And that's where the problem was.
Yeah.
And so TDD kind of said, well, if you can have these statements, as a user, I do this and I get that, or whatever, then you could have the simplest thing that could work, because you have to stop when the test goes green. And so that is going to shield you from gold plating and wasting time, right, et cetera. And you can get on with it, and you can time box yourself and have a nice, this good feeling that they say when you have the test going green. But the dark side of all that testing is that your code base goes higher. And we had another talk about testing in here, and it's about how that micro focus actually hurts you, because you have to treat integration tests still to see what the whole thing's doing. And unfortunately that's left off till the end, because while you're doing unit tests are supposed to be the most plentiful, because they point you to where the problem is if there's an error and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to have an integration test go bad, because I have to look for a needle in a haystack, because it could be anywhere along this long workflow. And I have to check all these, these mocked things, whether they're actually correct, any number of things, right? The setup's super long, align the planets for integration tests. So don't do those. It's the way that the integration tests were made that kind of is bad. And with event modeling, what we've discovered is that you just have to articulate the right abstraction for what a long running workflow is. And these are these to-do lists. And if you test those, you can treat them as a unit test. And in fact, you should be doing them all the way along. So we had this, I guess I can share the screen for this particular piece, because it's an interesting one that we don't talk about often enough. What the hell is this? Wrong board. Okay, let's get rid of that. Sorry, I have too many tabs open, so gotta filter through them. I think this is the one. Nope, not this one. Not this one. Okay, I have so many event modeling boards now. I can't even like find anything. I know it's in here somewhere. Is it this one? That's April 23rd. Nope. You know what? The link is probably easier to find in the Slack channel. Sorry, guys. I just for some reason I don't have a tab open, which I usually do. Let's go to event modeling. And their time tracking one. I think the link is in there. Ah, yes, there it is. All right. So now that I have this, I can share the screen. Share screen. Sure, just share the whole thing. Close these things. Zoom out, and some people have been helping. That's good. Where do I want to go? Ah, yes, this tiny little diagram here. Yeah, if you focus on testing, unit testing, and your testing pyramid is like this, tiny amount of integration. Does everyone see what I'm seeing, by the way?
Yep.
Okay, good, yep. Good. Okay, just want to double check. Sometimes I talk with my mic muted and everyone else muted, and it's like minutes before someone tells me. So, thank you. So, you know, if you have stories about how you manage users, how you manage products, how you do your orders, and how you do your payments, how you do the experience, that's all fine and dandy. And it goes like this. All the unit tests are going fine. And then it's time to make sure the whole thing's working. And that's, you get this phase 2 where you have that, all the integration tests. But the pyramid says you can only have a few of them, right? So it really what we want is a something that interleaves both all along. And I believe that the to-do lists and what the process managers do, you know, you don't have to treat them, you know, with kid gloves by doing sagas or whatever, is that you're constantly flipping between unit and integration, because in your event model, you have each slice includes both. So as you're doing each slice, you have a P1 and a P2, phase 1, phase 2 mixed together. And that's what gives you your no surprise moment, the oh crap moment in the project, where now everything has to work together. No matter how well your unit tests are going all the way along, you have the interconnectedness. And these may be, like, for example, we gave some things such as user accepted terms, add to cart, apply discount. These are things that might relate two separate units together, and they need to be paid attention to while you are actually working on developing the overall solution. You can't ignore them. And so I think TDD has done a bad thing. I'm not sure, it's definitely not intentionally, but yes, unit tests have that nice readability, etc. You skip all of the integration, the lining planets and all that. But these integration tests were hard because we had no architecture, if you'll allow me to use the word, for being able to talk about how they interact. It was always bespoke. And that was the magic, that every system was a snowflake. Yet it seemed like these domains are well known and the information in them is quite mundane, and we're really moving things left to right. So how come all of these projects always had this nasty end? Even agile projects, like, this is not, you know, no amount of doing unit tests correctly is going to save you from the fact that you have a lack of integration tests, even as prescribed. And the reason that this is prescribed is because integration tests, like I said before, need to align the planets. They have a lot of setup. So if they fail, it's hard to find why they failed. So they're always looked at as evil, right? Because, and then later, if you allow the traditional integration tests to become, have a large amount of them, any kind of bug that you have could set off any number of them. And now, not only do you have to find that bug that's affecting all these integration tests, now you have to modify all these integration tests because they're using the same units, right? So you have a huge slowdown in terms of, when you're going with this emergent design, that you start to really pay the price of having to refactor a ton of tests and fix a lot of tests the further you get in and the more and more complexity you've added, right? So anyway, that's kind of the technical reasons we're getting into Agile and why we have these structures. So, and this is where a lot of the evil happens, because developers can't even look up as they're trying to work overtime and weekends to finish this. And this is where the this is where the psychopaths from the middle management come in and take advantage. And that's when they make the strategic moves of who gets fired, who gets moved, what's their next best position to set themselves up for the next project. You see it in politics, right? People make emergencies and sensationalistic stuff to distract. Hey, look over here, worry about what I said here, and worry about this this policy that I'm putting in, and we're not going to protect the environment anymore, or we're going to start a war here. And now everyone doesn't have time to look at anything else except trying to stop the war. And they do whatever they want on the other side. So it happens in an organization.
Adam, right? I live in Britain. We're currently setting fire to every relationship we have. So I'm well aware of it.
I understand. Yeah. Yeah, it's I feel for you. That's horrible. I was in London was it last year? Yeah, I think it was. It may have been 2 years ago. I've traveled so much in the last couple of years before COVID. I don't even remember the last time I was there, but I was in London doing this workshop there with Chris Condren, who's the former CTO of Event Store. But yeah, it's too bad what's gone on, but you can see the same kind of thing, right? Happening in organizations, and it's almost like clockwork. Sometimes it's done at the beginning, and so there's sabotage. Hey, these people don't have their ducks in a row. The requirements are not good enough. And it's like, well, who says what requirements are good enough? I thought you were Agile. I thought these were going to, be done iteratively. As you find out more, we can start on the project, right? So they play both sides of the argument in politics. So whether it's at the beginning of the project or the end of the project, those are the times when you make your political moves. And it just happens. If your organization is susceptible to political moves, I think it would be a good idea to, fix that so that you can actually see people's effectiveness for what it's worth, rather than the interpretation of what, how it's being spun politically.